Good morning, welcome to Holy Trinity. It's lovely to see you all here this morning. I'm reliably informed the blue thing that you saw as you came in is called sky. So we celebrate the sky and even the sun occasionally. I don't know how it has been with you. I hope that you haven't been flooded in any sense. I do know that there are a lot of people still away and ill. The congregations are beginning to come back. But you might know friends or people you've been sitting near that are still not well. And I just think it's really important for us to say to them, you are loved and you are missed. So if you are able to drop them a line, please do. And if you don't know how to do that because you don't know their address or whatever, please do have a word with me or Barbara Arthur, who's just there. Barbara, could you just wave your hand, who heads up our pastoral ministry and a whole team of people that look after each other here. So please do either see me or Claire or Barbara, and we can then drop them a line for you. We're beginning to plan for Christmas. On Friday, we pretty much chose all our carols from all our services. How organised is this? I just want you to know. You've got an organised vicar here. Jeff and Lisa keep me in check. If this is a long way around of saying, if you would like to join the Christmas choir, we would love you to join our Christmas choir. What a joy it is, actually, to lead the whole of the village that turns up in strength over our Christmas period with a real sense of wonder and joy in the singing of our choir, of our carols. So if you're able to join our Christmas choir, not this Friday, but next Friday, they start practicing in earnest, and we'd love you to be part of that. We'll put notices in the notices sheets. So today we come to the second in our series in the book of Malachi. And you may know that Malachi is the last book in the Old Testament, and therefore this represents the last words that God gives to his people before we hit 400 years of silence, and then of course the birth of Jesus. So this marks the end of an era. This book is like an end of term appraisal, an end of term school report. And to be honest, you're probably getting the idea that it doesn't make great reading. I don't know, you probably had wonderful school reports. That wasn't always my experience. One year I was so afraid of the results that I actually bought a whole bunch of different coloured biros from the corner shop. And when I got home, I carefully opened the school reports and changed some of the marks before my parents got to see them. Do you know that with a little care, you can turn a C- into a C+. A single stroke of a pen. Not great, but not terrible either. And if you're really, really careful, you can turn a D fail into a B pass. Just saying. My mum, who didn't know any of this, is now sitting in the back of church in shock. Of course, it didn't really help with the comments, which went something like this. Stephen has successfully improved the clarity of his handwriting, which has now unfortunately revealed his inability to spell. Well, the people of Israel get their end-of-year report from Malachi, and it doesn't make encouraging reading. This morning, I want to talk you through the failure of the priests, the failure of worship, and the failure of the temple in the Old Testament. And then how God, through special measures, allows them to graduate with honour. The failure of the priests and the worship of the temple, and how God honours us with distinction. That's what I want to do. Let's talk about the priests. What the people needed were effectively good priests. Why? Well, because ever since God created human beings, our decision to go our own way and be our own boss and follow our own rules have unleashed a tidal wave of hurt upon pretty much everything that we have touched. And we've touched on that this morning. Human sin has fractured our relationship within ourselves, with other people, with our world, and of course with God. And as a result, what people often look for is someone to stand in the gap between themselves and God. A priest. A priest is someone who stands in the gap between people and God. A priest represents people to God and God to people. Priests are like phone adapters. They connect things together. Priests take God to people in terms of their teaching and demonstrating actions, and they take people to God through worship and sacrifice and prayer. They present people to God and God to people. That's at least the theory. Very often people think, I'm not good enough, I'm not dedicated enough, I'm not knowledgeable enough, I'm not spiritual enough, I'm not religious enough. So let's create a special caste of people and we're going to call them priests. Let's give them special clothes and invent special names for them and give them special things to do with special things whose names I still haven't learnt. But let's take the best of us and call them priests. And again, I tell you, this is the theory. How did the priests do? Well, Malachi chapter 1 verse 6 gives us the answer. You priests show contempt for my name. The priests fail. It turns out that priests, all priests everywhere, are just normal human beings who are no better and sometimes a lot worse than everyone else. Who would have guessed? All priests fail. We don't need to spend any time together with me taking you through the litany of news articles that speak about the abuse and the mistakes and the corrosive behaviour of priests. All priests fail because all priests are human. But these priests, they failed in one particular way. These priests failed by colluding with the development of a me-centered religion in Israel. A me-centered religion basically works like this. It's a belief that God exists to solve our problems, that God's there to make our life better, to help us become more successful. If we do God good, then God will make things better for us. So God is there, essentially, to help us. And if he doesn't help us, then God has failed. Isn't this their chief complaint that we looked at last week in verse 2? Just how have you loved us, God? Because we don't see it. Their go-to prayer in the morning was like this: God, this is what we ask of you today. Not, God, what is it you ask of me today? But God, how can you do and help my agenda? Not, God, what is your agenda? How can I join in? And the priests allowed the people to turn their relationship with God upside down. So, of course, when things started to happen that they didn't like, they blamed God. God, why did you let this happen? God, where are you? God, exactly how are you helping in this situation? This is a me-centered religion, and it can actually infect all of us from time to time. Yet, doesn't it stand to reason that if God is real, and if God exists, and if God is the creator being who is good, who made all things and gives all things life and sustains all things, then he is worthy of all honour and all praise and all worship and all the focus that we can give. So that regardless of what happens to us, we live for his glory. And this change of focus, we live for his glory, transforms our life and our faith. It becomes a God-centered faith. Life then becomes an adventure, a partnership, a roller coaster ride of doing things with God, making a difference for God wherever we are, of trusting God even when things get tricky. Me-centered faith is dead and powerless, but a God-centered faith changes lives. The priests fail. They fail to show what it means to honour God. They get an F, they get 0 point. Their worship failed as well. Verse 7, they offered defiled food on the altar. They treated the Lord's table as contemptible. They offered blind and lame and diseased animals for sacrifice. What's wrong with that? Well, worship actually reveals to us what we think of God. Worship is an expression of the worth that we want to ascribe to God. And the answer that the people gave about how much they thought of God was not much, really. What do they give to God? The minimum acceptable. Whatever they can get away with. Whatever they won't miss, God can have. We show people the worth that we hold them in by what we give them. If a loved child of ours passes their driving test, we could buy them a safe and sensible car with a full service history that costs a few £1,000s from a reliable dealer, or we could buy them a car that's been written off and then reconditioned by Honest John's garage for 50 quid just down the road. Which is more worthy of our children? So what is worthy of God? Let's just ask that question. What is worthy of God? In the Old Testament, from Cain and Abel all the way through to Malachi, the deal was you give the best of the first. God is worth the best of the first. The first of our week, the first of our income, the first of our priorities, the best of our time, the best of our focus, the best of our talents. That is what God is worth. But what were they doing? They were giving what they don't want, making sacrifices that cost them nothing. As a result, their worship fails, for it revealed that God, in fact, really didn't mean that much to them. End-of-year reports, priests fail, worship failed, temple failed. God says, verse 10, "Oh, that one of you would just shut the door of my temple, so that you would not light useless fires on my altar." The temple is supposed to be the connection point between heaven and earth. It is the place where we meet with God, where we experience His presence. The temple is supposed to be the place where we are blown away by the wonder of God, moved to tears by His grace, a place of healing and a place of hope. But we read it fails because they don't encounter God. In fact, we see the temple experience is dull and boring, and verse 12, they consider it a burden. So, if I haven't successfully depressed you by now, let me fix that. What the people needed was a priest to stand in the gap between them and God and show them that God was worthy of all their love and devotion. What they needed was worship that built their faith and their relationship with God. What they needed was a temple where they encountered the transforming presence of God. But what they got was priests who failed to do their job, worship that was half-hearted, and a temple that was just dull. Dear God, end-of-year report for your special people, Israel. They seem to have reached rock bottom, and they continue to dig. Does God have a plan to turn this round? Is there a hope for this wayward child? Incredibly, is there a way that they might graduate with honour and distinction? Well, you bet. Do you see buried right in the middle of verse 9? This little phrase, "Now plead with God to be gracious." God has a plan. Verse 11, "My name will be great among the nations, from where the sun rises to where the sun sets." God says, I have something in mind so that in every place all around the world, pure offerings of worship will be said. Let's take this roadshow and make it global, says God. You can't do it. You can't do it. I've been working with you on it for 2,000 years. You've been my special worked example, and it's proven it doesn't work. So I will do it for you. Not only will I do it for you, Israel, but I'm going to do it for everyone, everywhere. I will provide the priest. I will make the sacrifice, and I will build a temple that will blow your minds. And so when we turn over to the next book of the Bible, in this story arc, after God has had 400 years of silence, that's it, end of term, summer over, let's start a new chapter. There is the dawn of a new age, and his name is Jesus. Jesus is the priest that we need, a priest without sin, a perfect priest, Son of God and Son of Man, represents us to God and God to us. He alone can show you what God is like. He alone shows you what love and truth and compassion in perfection looks like. You want to know what God is like, everybody? Look to Jesus. He presents you to God and God to you. He presents you to God. He says to God, this one is mine. This one is loved. This one is covered by my grace. Jesus is the perfect, everyday priest for all of us, all the time. Jesus is also the one who makes the perfect sacrifice. Anything that I could do to offer to God is almost by definition, verse 12, beneath God. But 1 Peter 1 verse 19 says Jesus is the Lamb without spot or defect or blemish. God offers himself a perfect sacrifice to atone for guilt, make up for our failure. This is what God is worth. This is worthy of God. God gives his all. God gives everything he has to all those he loves. This is worthy of God. Every day, all the time, Jesus gives himself for you and for me. And we are covered in his goodness. I was told that priests, Anglican priests, wear those white surplices to remind them, to remind everybody that they're covered in the love of Jesus. If that's true, all of us should be wearing white surplices. I'm going to be buying a whole bunch of them, and as you come in next Sunday, I'm going to give you one each to wear, like a sheet, and we can all look ridiculous together. Jesus provides the priest, he makes the sacrifice, he builds the place of encounter. This has to be one of the most thrilling pieces of truth you will ever come across. Where does love and mercy meet? Not in a temple, but at the foot of a cross. Not in a building, but in your hearts. Every heart that sees Jesus, the priest, God and man. Every heart that sees the sacrifice. Every heart that receives grace is a place of encounter. Heaven and earth meet at the cross within your hearts. And then we are never the same again. God provides the priest, God provides the sacrifice, and God builds the temple. And then God says, I give it to you. Graduate with honour and distinction. Go. Be my priests in the world. All believers are priests. Go reflect me to the world. Intercede for the world. As you've received, give. As you've been forgiven, forgive. As you've been served by me, serve others. As you've been loved by me, love others. I give you this distinctive honour. Go, be priests, all of us. Wherever we go tomorrow morning, at work, at home, at school, at uni, wherever it may be for us, you are a priest of God. Not perfect, but you've seen perfection in action in Jesus. Go, be priests. Go make the sacrifice. God doesn't want a bull or a goat or even 10% of you. God wants all of you. All of you for all of him. That's the deal. Paul said, therefore, in view of God's mercy, offer your souls and bodies to be living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. Why? Because this is your true and proper worship. Oh my goodness, everything I do and everything I say is given to God in worship. And as we do that, you place yourself in the centre of God's will. And as you are in the centre of God's will, you will experience His smile on your life. And this is life transforming. God says, I give you this distinctive honour. Go. Make the sacrifice. See the difference that it makes. Go. You are a temple of the Holy Spirit. The Old Testament temple has been destroyed. It is gone. So now, where is the meeting place between heaven and earth? A church? No. A cathedral? No. That's just way too Old Testament. These things are just buildings. You and me, we are the temple of the Holy Spirit. Your heart is the place where prayers are made. Your mind is the place where you see the wonder of God. Your soul is the place where you are filled with the Holy Spirit, if you ask. Wherever you go, you are a portable tabernacle. The presence of God goes with you. And through you and your prayers, others will encounter God. Isn't this just so much bigger and so much better than the Old Testament? Doesn't this actually honour the Old Testament, fulfill the Old Testament, and transform the Old Testament? It's just great. The Old Testament tells us how it should be. The New Testament tells us how it works. We need Jesus. Priests fail. Religion fails. Morality fails. Politics fail. Leaders fail. Jesus never fails. We are priests. We are the sacrifice. We are the place of encounter. And with that, we graduate with distinctive honour. Thanks be to God.